Okay. Okay, like I mentioned, my father's away today, so you get me for all three chapters. We're going to continue with the laws of Shabbos. We're up to chapter 18 of the laws of Shabbos, and we're going to continue talking about carrying on Shabbos. And carrying on Shabbos, the premise of chapter 18 is that you can't carry something on Shabbos and you can't carry something that's valuable to you. So obviously, if you have lint in your pocket, it's not a big deal because it's not valuable to you. But if that lint means something to you, so then it's a different story, right? So the Rambam is now going to go through the details of what's considered to be a specific amount, and enough of amount that it's called a shear, it's called an amount that you're not allowed to carry on Shabbos. And obviously it differs from thing to thing, whether it's food, whether it's clothing, etc., etc. So we're going to go through one by one in chapter 18, all the different things that you're not allowed to carry. What's the amount that you're not allowed to carry? Now, halachically, you're not allowed to carry any amount. Biblically, you're not allowed to carry any amount. But from the rabbinic, from the rabbis, we have a certain amount that you're not supposed to carry. Okay, so chapter 18, halacha number 1, Aleph. If you take something from a private domain to a public domain, we talked about this in the previous chapters about private and public domains, or from public to private, you're not liable. You're not liable until you have a beneficial amount, an amount that's considered beneficial. And this is the amounts for the carrying. If you're going to carry food for a person, food for a human, so then it's kigregeres, then it's the size of a dried fig. So if you have the amount of a size of a dried fig, that is when you're liable. And if you have different foods together, if it's the size of a dried fig, mitzarfin zaim zed, they do the quantity of different foods, they do get included one to the other. And it has to be that it's the amount has to be from the food itself, and not including the klipim, v'garinim, v'iktzin, v'asubim, v'amorsin. It doesn't include the shells, the seeds, the stems, the shaft, the bran. That's not included in the measurement. Meaning, we only include in this measurement the food that you could actually eat. Halacha beis number 2. Yayin, on the other hand, wine, a quarter of a revius. A revius is a certain amount. A revius is about 3 point something ounces, so a quarter of that. But if it was congealed, so then it's a solid. So then it's kazayis. Then it's the size of an olive. Chalev, behema, tahira, milk of a kosher animal, kedegimia. So that is enough for one gulp. That's considered already to be a sizable amount. And a non-kosher milk, so it's enough to apply to an eye. It's something that people used to use on their eyes for some medicinal purposes. So then, as soon as it's enough to cover one eye, then it is something that is valuable. Then it is something that is usable. Chalev isha. Milk for a woman's milk, so then v'loiven beitza, and the white of an egg, they leave in b'mishifa, enough to anoint, to smear on the toe of a newborn infant. Shemen kidei lasochet baktana, so and oil enough to put on the toe of a child. Tal. In order to use it as a base for eye ointment, and eye ointment enough that you could use it as a mixture in water. Water enough to washing a dirty face. Dvash, honey enough, enough to apply on the top, just the top of a wound. Dam ushar kolamashkin, blood and other liquids, So Hasheichin Kedei Revius. So then that is and other waters that the dirty waters. So that is a Revius. So again, these are all different amounts depending on what you are carrying. Different amounts of how much you need to carry in order to be liable. Anything less than that, it's putter. You're not liable. Still, we don't carry, obviously, even less than that amount. Number 3, halacha gimel, teven, tvua, kimloi pipara. So now we're talking about straw. What is straw? What would you use it for? With grain, what would you use it for? So this is usually animal feed. So animal feed, it has to be enough to fill the mouth of a cow. Teven kidneys, kimloi pigamol, and then straw when it comes from beans. So that's not for cows. That's for camels. So for camels, it needs to be the size of the mouth of a camel. What if you took out, even though it's not usually given to cows, but if you took out straw from beans, and you gave it, and you were taking it out, having in mind to give it to a cow, and so since you were doing it for the cow, and you took out the less amount, meaning the size for. Please mute yourself. That way you don't make the noise over here. If you're taking out less amount, meaning the amount for the cow, even if it was not the regular way, but still you're giving it to a cow to eat, so then it is considered to be food for a cow to eat. Amir, kimloi pitole, straws from grain. So then it is the size of a lamb's mouthful, and asavim grass the size of a kid's mouthful, a gdi. Leaves of garlic and leaves of onion. If they were fresh, wet is literal translation, but it means that they were fresh. So then it is considered to be human food. So then it's kigregeres. Then it's the size of a dried fig. And vivashim, and if they're dry, so then it is the size of a kid's mouthful. And you don't join one to another, meaning one grouping to another. You don't join them together. That you don't do it for the more serious one of them, but you do for meaning you do it for the bigger amount, but not for the smaller amount. If you take out which is straw from grain, and you mix it with straw from beans. So if you have the smaller amount, which is kimloi pipara, which is the size of the mouth of a cow, so pater, so then you're not liable. Kimloi pigamal, if you have the bigger amount, the size of the mouth of a camel, chayav, you are liable. So when it comes to Shabbos, you go with the bigger amount. And it is mitzaref, meaning the two different kinds do join together. Halacha dalet number 4. If someone takes out wood in order to cook the size of if someone takes out wood, right, to make a fire to cook a chicken's egg. So the amount of a dried fig, but it was to cook eggs. So when the egg is beaten, mixed with oil, and placed in a pot, meaning that it's ready to making food out of it. So that is the amount. That's the amount. If someone takes out a reed in order. So someone transfers a reed, it is liable when it is large enough to make a pen that reaches to the top of his fingers. So that's the size of it. And if it was more thick, so then it is the same idea as wood. Then it goes into the same category as wood. Halacha hey number 5. If someone takes out spices, and the spices was in order to spice the egg that he was going to make. So now the spices do join together to make the measurement together with the egg. Pilpil. But on the other hand, pepper is kolshu. Itron, pine sap, kolshu. Reyafta is even the slightest amount. What's the idea over here? That again, we mentioned in the beginning of the chapter that the concept over here is that what is valuable to you. So black pepper, even a little bit of black pepper is already a value, right? You put it into your eggs, you're not putting a ton of black pepper. So a kolshu, even the slightest amount, or pine sap. So all different types of spices or fragrance. So a substance or a pleasant fragrance, even in slightest amount. A substance with an unpleasant fragrance, again, even the slightest amount. Perfumes, even the slightest amount. Fine purple dye, even the slightest amount. Rosebuds, 1. So rosebuds, there is an amount that it has to be 1. Besula saveret. Now, pieces of utensils made from hard metal, for example, bronze or iron. So now these are, it's not like gold, it's not a precious metal like gold, but still they're precious, right? So even a little bit is valuable. So then kol shein me'afar mizbeach me'avnei mizbeach me'merek svarim me'mekek mitbachis shalahen kol shein. So whether it's from the stones or from an altar, the earth of the altar, or decayed scrolls which we have to bury or wrapped in cloths, etc. So even the slightest amount, because even a piece of paper that came out of a siddur or something like that, we're going to bury it, right? It's holy, so we have to bury it. So therefore, we are careful with it. So since we are careful with it, so then you're not allowed to carry it on Shabbos. Gachelas, a coal show, even the slightest amount of coal. But if you transfer flame, so you are not liable. Halacha 6, halacha vav. If someone takes out second. I missed out on that. Sorry about that. I saw the chat now. But you're good now. A person who transfers seeds, planting seeds, right? They're not meant for eating. They're planting seeds, and so the amount is less than the regular, less than food. It's less than a dried fig. So what's the amounts? If it's 2 cucumber seeds or 2 gourd seeds, and when it comes to Egyptian bean seeds, then it is 5. Someone who transfers coarse bran. So why does he take it out? To place in the opening of a crucible for a gold refiner, right? So then he is liable. If someone takes out fine bran, if it's for eating, if the intent is to eat, so then the measure is like regular food, the size of a dried fig. But what if it's lebehema? If it's for an animal to eat, so then it's the amount is the size of a kid's mouthful. An animal, kid's mouthful. If you're taking it out for painting, for coloring, so then it's enough to paint a small cloth. The buds of shrubs and carobs that have not yet become sweet. So the size is the size of a dried fig. But when they become sweet, so then the size of the mouth of a kid goat. Aval aluf, mustard and turmos, all these other types of plants. So then it is the size of the dried fig. So again, if you take out the size of dried fig, that's when you're liable. Otherwise, you're putter. So you still don't carry that, but it's putter avloser. Halacha zayin number 7. If someone takes out seeds, if he's taking it out to eat, so then you have to take out 5 in order to be liable. If you're using them to fuel a fire, so then it's considered like wood, and we mentioned wood before. What if you're using it for counting? You have seeds, and you need to keep a count of something that's going on. So you take, every time you wanted to add a number, in order you don't forget. Today we'd write it down, we put it on our phones or something like that. So then they would take a seed and put it in their pocket, and then they would count how many seeds. You want to count how many bundles you're taking into the house or something like that, right? So if you're using for counting, two is already an amount. It's already a count. And for sewing, also 2. Someone who takes out haisab if it was for human consumption, right? Based on intent. If it was for eating, so kigregeres, the size of a dried fig. Lebehema, if for an animal to eat, so kimlei pligdi, so then it's the size of a kid goat's mouth. Leitzim, kishira eitzim, if it was taking it out for wood, so then it goes in the category of wood. Lahazaya, kishira azaya, if you were taking out the sprinkles, so then the measure goes based on sprinkling. Halacha ches number 8. If you take the shells of nuts, shells of pomegranates, so these are different types of shells that are used to make colors, in order to be able to color, in order to paint. So then it's the amount is if it's enough to dye a small garment, a small piece of cloth, for example, a hairnet that young girls place on their heads, that young girls put on their head. Someone who takes out the urine that is 40 days old, Alexandria, or this Alexandrian ether, was a special something. It's something that came from Alexandria, a special spice. My body's kamina. Sorry, it wasn't a spice, it was something that they used to clean. These are all different types of things that were used in the cleaning process of clothing. So if it's enough to clean a small piece of a small garment, and for example, as we gave before, the small hairnet that a young girl would put on her head, so then if it's enough to clean that, so then it is your chayiv, you're liable. If someone transfers herbs that are soaking, shruyin, in order to color with them, so it has to be enough that it would be a sample for a weaver. So if it's enough that you could say, here, look, I have this color. Would you like to buy this color? I have more of it at home. But if it's enough to be a sample, so then you are liable to, if you carry that on Shabbos. Halacha test number 9. So if you remember, we talked about one of the 39 things that you're not allowed to do on Shabbos is writing, and how much do you have to write in order to be liable? It's 2 letters. So if you take out ink and it's on a quill, right? So today we have pens, we don't have to worry about these things. But if you have a quill and you fill up the quill with ink, so how much ink do you have to have in the quill in order to be liable? So you have to have enough ink in there. You have to have enough ink in there in order to write 2 letters. But what if the ink was in the inkwell? It wasn't in the quill. So then you need to have more ink in there, because you don't, when you put the quill to take the ink, you're not going to be able to take all the ink that's in the inkwell. So therefore, it has to have enough in there that when you put the quill inside, you'll get enough ink to write 2 letters on with this quill. If the inkwell had enough to write 1 letter, and in the feather, in the quill, there was enough to write 1 letter. So if you had enough for, you're carrying both of them, so they technically join together. So, but the Rambam says it's a suffix. We're not sure whether he's liable if he had enough to write 1 letter in one and another letter with the other. If he took out that quill, and as he's walking down the street, he wrote 2 letters. So there's a general rule, and we've learned about this already, that in order to be liable for carrying, you need to pick it up in a private domain and put it down in a public domain, or pick it up in a public domain and put it down in a private domain. If you picked it up and you never put it down, so then you're not liable. So here, what's the putting down? The putting down is the writing. That's what the Rambam is telling you. That if you took that quill, it has enough to write 2 letters, and you took it from a private domain, and you walk in a public domain, and you never put it down, but on the way you scribbled on a wall, you scribbled 2 letters, you're liable, because that's considered putting it down. Writing those letters is considered putting it down. Writing is putting it down. If he took out if he took out 1 letter and he wrote it down, if he took out from private domain to a public domain enough for 1 letter and he wrote it in a public domain, and then he went back and took, so then Potter, he's not liable. Why? Because when he's writing the 2nd letter, he doesn't have the 1st letter. It's 2 separate actions, and he's not liable. Halacha Yud, number 10. Someone takes out paint, eye paint, makeup. Whether this makeup, this eye paint, is in order for, if it's for medicinal purposes or it's cosmetic purposes. So the amount is if it's enough to paint to put onto 1 eye, so it's already considered to be a significant amount. But if you live in a place where there's no such thing, like today, you don't put cosmetically, you don't put on 1 eye and not on the other eye, right? So then in that case you need to be carrying enough to color 2 eyes. Tar and sulfur, so enough to make a hole. Devek wax, enough to make it to close a hole. Revav, fat, enough to grease the size of a sela under a cake. Halacha Yud Aleph, number 11. If someone takes out clay, earth, but earthenware, enough to make a seal for a letter, that's already, you're liable. Clay, enough to make the opening of a crucible. Zevel, manure, or fine sand, enough to fertilize a leek. So thicker, firm clay, right? It's a thicker, coarse sand, so enough to mix with a full trowel of lime. And now charsi is firm clay. So that's enough to make an opening of a goldsmith crucible. Seyor, hair, so here you need to have enough to mix with the clay to make the opening of a goldsmith crucible. I guess they used to mix them. Seed, lime, so lime enough to apply on a finger of a young girl. Afar, va'efer, dust or ash, enough to cover the blood of a small bird. As there's a mitzvah that when you shecht a bird, you cover it with afar, with dust, and if you have enough of that dust to do that mitzvah, so then you're already liable. Tzroid even, a pebble, it has to be a big enough pebble that if you throw it at an animal, the animal will feel it. And that's the weight of 10 zuz. And a cheres, a shard of like a shard of a utensil, so it has to be enough to contain a revius, which again is about 3-point-something ounces. Halacha Yud Beis. Number 12. Someone takes out a rope. How much rope? So it has to be sufficient to make a handle for a container that you wrap it around the container, and then you could hold the container with it. Gami reads enough to make a hook and hang the sifter in the sieve. Again, to use it to hold on to it. Palm leaves, enough to make a handle for Egyptian basket. And sieve alpi mashbech katan shel yayin, palm bast, enough to use as a stopper for a small pitcher of wine. Unprocessed wool, enough to make a ball the size of a nut. Etzem, bone. How much bone do you have to take out to be liable? Enough to make a spoon, right? They would make utensils out of bone. Is chuchis, glass, enough to sharpen the weaver's needle. Or if you be able to, it's big enough, the glass is big enough to cut 2 pieces of thread at once. So it's a big enough piece of glass that it could cut 2 pieces at the same time. Halacha is Gimel, number 13. A person that transfers 2 hairs from the tail of a horse or a cow, so chayav, he is liable. If he takes 1 bristle from a pig's back, so already he's liable. Fibers from a date palm, so you need to have 2. And the bark of a date branch is 1. Is mitzemer gefen, cotton. How much cotton? Mitzemer kloch and silk. Mitzemer gemalim and camel's wool. Varnovim and rabbit's wool. Vechaya and animal wool. Shebayam in the sea. Ushar kol anitvin kidei litves chut. And anything else that any other fibers that you're going to use to spin in order to make thread. So then it needs to be enough to spin 4 handbreadths long. So it needs to be that after you spin it, you're going to get a string that is 4 handbreadths. Again, a handbreadth is this amount. So 4 handbreadths is about this amount long. If it could do that, then you are liable. If someone takes from his clothing or from a bag or from leather. So there has to be a certain amount. If I remember correctly, I think it's arba al arba. It has to be 4 fingers. The side of 4 fingers are 4 fingers, 4 fingers squared. And once it's 4 fingers, he mentions right away. Meaning that if this piece can become impure, so then you're not allowed to carry it on Shabbos. If this piece cannot become impure because it's too small to become impure, then you are not liable if you carry it on Shabbos. So a beged, a piece of clothing, so then if it's 3 fingers squared, shleisha, a sackcloth, a bag, so it has to be 4 by 4, and leather has to be 5 by 5. So that is the amount. If it's that size or more, then it could be makabel tuma, then it could become impure. So then also it will be, if it can become impure, so then you're not allowed to carry it on Shabbos. Halacha 14, Yudalit. If you take out leather that was not processed, you didn't work on it. Ella adayin hurach shiur, and it's still soft. Shiurik de lotzur mishkolas ktana shemishkala shekel. So the amount, the measure is enough to wrap a small weight the size of a shekel. If it could hold a weight, a small weight, so then you are liable. If it was already salted. But you didn't do the process of putting flour, right? So it's a process of salting and then flour of leib apmash, and you also didn't put this galna juice in order to process it. So then shiori kedelasis kameya. So then the amount is, if it's big enough to make an omelet out of it, which is a certain type, is a piece that you would hang around your neck or something like that. So you did the salting and you did the flour process already, but you didn't put the galna juice yet. If it's big enough to write a bill of divorce, if it's big enough to write a get on it, so then it's already considered to be an amount. But if it's already finished the process with the galna juice and everything, and it's already considered to be parchment, so then if it's just 5 fingers squared, you're liable if you carry it on Shabbos. Halacha Tesvav, number 15. If you take out processed parchment and it's enough space to write the first paragraph of Shema. Shema, we had in last week's parsha, right? Shema until Uvisharecha. So that's already big enough. Duchstus, which is the other type of, we talked about other type of parchment, which is big enough to write a mezuzah, which is the first two paragraphs of the Shema. Niyar, paper, papyrus paper, if it's big enough just to write two letters already, shall kasher, 2 letters for shal kesher mertzin shein delos meisis shalanu, 2 letters for a customs officer receipt, which is big letters. They're not just small letters; they're big letters. I guess a stamp of a signature or something like that. Hamaitzi kesher mertzin chayav afal pishik varer o lameiches v'niftar b'ishareira oya hila oilam. If someone takes out this piece of paper that has these 2 big letters, even if he already showed it to the customs officer and he passed, so it's he and you might say that he doesn't need it anymore. No, he still needs it as proof that he went through the customs, etc. So then he is liable. If you have a document of a loan, but you already paid that loan, when you are mochuk, or a paper, but it's erased. Everything that's on it is erased. So you have to take out enough that you could wrap around a small flask of perfume. And if it has enough clean part of the paper, large enough to write 2 letters, so then you're already liable. So this is only talking about when you didn't have enough space. Halach Zayin 16. If you carry an animal or a bird, even though they're alive, so you're still liable. But if you're carrying a living person, another human being, you're not liable. It's a famous concept in the Gemara of a person carries himself, and therefore you're not liable if you're carrying them. But if he was tied up or he was sick, so then I might say then he can't carry himself. So then if you carried him, you are liable. A woman is allowed to walk their son, when you're holding the hand. So you're technically holding them, but if the child is taking the steps, then it is okay. Halacha 17. Take a living child, and he has some sort of purse, a bag around his neck. So then you are liable for the bag that the child is carrying, because you're allowed to carry the child, but you're not allowed to carry the bag becomes a part of it does not become a part of the child, and it's separate. That is when it's a child, but an adult, anything that he's wearing, anything that's on him, it becomes secondary to him. If he had his garments folded, meaning he wasn't wearing them, it was folded and it was on his shoulder, so then you are liable for carrying those things. Halacha 18. If you carry a chagav chai, if you carry a locust, a live locust, kolshu, even the smallest amount. Umeis, what if it's a dead one? So then it is the size of a dried fig. Then you're liable. A bird of the vineyard, so you're liable whether it's alive or whether it's dead. Any amount, because some people use it and it's valuable to them for medical purposes, medicinal purposes, and anything similar that you're going to need. Again, going back to the beginning of the chapter where I mentioned anything that for you it's valuable for whatever reason. So even the smallest amount, if that small amount is valuable to you, so you are liable. A corpse, a corpse or a corpse of a human corpse. Sorry, a mace, like human corpse. Nevela is a carcass, an animal carcass. Vasheretz and creepy crawlies. Kishior tumason kach shior asan. As we mentioned before, any amount that could be that is impure, that is tamei, so that is the amount that you're not allowed to carry a Shabbos. So mace and avela kazayis, a piece of a corpse or a carcass, it's the size of an olive. Visheretz kadosha, and a creepy crawly, a bug, is the size of a lentil. Halacha Yutes 19. If you had an exact amount of an olive-sized portion, and you took out a half of it, chayev, then he is liable. Now, if you have, he's liable. Why? Because there is value to what he did. What's the value to what he did? He took out a half olive. So now what's left is a half an olive, and it can't become tamei. It can't become impure. So that value makes it valuable for him to take out a half olive, and therefore he's liable for taking out even that half olive. What if there was 1.5 olives in the house, size of 1.5 olives, and he takes out a half? So there's still the size of 1 olive left there, so therefore it could become impure. Potter is not liable. And also similar. Again, the Rambam just gave another way where a person can derive benefit, that it's valuable to him to take out even a smaller amount, and therefore he's liable and he can't carry that amount on Shabbos. Halacha 20, Chaf. So when are we talking about that he's not liable if he took it out stam for no reason? But if you're taking it out to plant or for medicinal purposes, or he took it for a sample, he wanted to show people a sample of it, so then it's valuable. So then he's liable even for the smallest amount. Halacha 21, if someone puts away something for planting or for medicinal purposes, or to show as a sample, and he forgot why. He says, oh, 1 second, I have this over here and I forgot why I put it there. And he took it out for no specific reason. Chayav, he's still liable because his original purpose of putting it away is what we go according to. But if someone else took it, so then he's not liable because he didn't have that original thought. If this one threw it, but if he threw it somewhere else, so then we do cancel his first thought. Therefore, so therefore, if he went again and took it out, so we only go based on the amount, the shear that we talked about, and that's each thing is different. The amount that you would be liable if you carried on Shabbos. Halacha 22, Chav Beis Davar. If something that people don't store, they're not careful about, and they don't put away, they don't feel that it's valuable. And for example, the blood of a woman's discharge, menstrual discharge, but if someone went and decided to hold on to it and carried it on Shabbos, he is still liable. But if anybody else carried it, didn't put it away, just carried it by whatever, then he's not liable. Because really, we're only liable for something that someone cares about and puts away properly for themselves, and it's a normal thing that people keep. Put away and keep. Halacha Chav Gimel, number 23. If someone takes out a half the amount, right? So then he is not liable. And if any of the other 39 malachas, if you did it halfway, you're also not liable. If you went and took half of it out and brought it outside, and then you took another half and you brought it, so then you are liable. But if you went and you picked up the first half and you put it away somewhere else, so then they do not combine. It's as if it got burnt and it disappeared, and you're not liable. If you took out half the amount, that you become liable and you put it down. And you went inside and you took the other half, and you brought it further. You didn't combine it with the first half. You brought it further, but it's within 3. It's within 3. I guess it's within 3 handbreadths. So then you are liable. Because if you go over it, it's like you connected it to it. If you threw it, if you didn't just like carry it over, if you threw it, so then then you are not liable until they connect. Halacha Chavdalid 24. Hoitzi chatzi shiur v'chazer v'hoitzi chatzi shiur behelim achas l'rshus achas chayiv. If someone takes half of the amount and afterwards takes another half of the amount to the same domain in a single period of unawareness, meaning that he didn't realize that it's Shabbos or etc. So then chayiv is liable. Shtei reshuyos. If you took it to 2 different domains, if there is a separation between those 2 domains in a place that you would be liable, so then you're not liable. But if it was a Carmelist, and this we talked at length in previous chapters, Carmelist is that rabbinic area, not the public domain, but the rabbinic area that you're not allowed to carry. So then you are obligated to bring a a sacrifice. Halacha Chafei 25. If someone takes out less than the amount and before he puts it down, it became like it blew up. It got bigger on its own, and it became the size of the amount that you were liable. So either way, or when you took it out and it got smaller, because of the weather, because of the heat, it got bigger, or because of the heat, it got smaller. So therefore, you are not liable. Halacha Chavav, number 26. If someone takes out the amount of a dried fig in order to eat, and it got smaller before you put it down outside, and now you're thinking about using it for planting or l'refuah, or for medicinal purposes, shiur, and that you don't need the amount of a dried fig, he is liable because now it's not big enough to eat. So he says, I'll use it to plant. You're thinking about using it to plant, then it's a smaller amount, and we go according to that thought process, and you are liable. If you take less than the size of a dried fig for planting, but then all of a sudden you go outside and you say, this looks beautiful, I want to eat it instead of planting it. So and it's smaller than the size of a dried fig, so pater, you're not liable. And if it got bigger before you put it down, and it did become the proper size before you decided to eat it, so chayev, you are liable. Because you are liable for the thought of taking it out. Halacha Chav Zayin 27. So if you took out, when you left the house, it was the size of a dried fig, and you had in mind that you're going to eat it. Then it got smaller, and then but before you put it down, it got again big. So it got smaller, then bigger again. So then it's a suffix. It's not. We're not sure. The Rambam is not sure. If you took a size of an olive of food and you threw it into a house of tumah, of impurity, and now this size of an olive became part of the food that was inside the house, now it became the size of an egg size. So it's a question if it became obligated because you threw it on Shabbos, but it only became part of the tumah once it became the size of an egg. So it's a suffix, not sure if you are liable or not in that case. The final halacha in the first chapter, halacha Chavches 28, if you take out less than the shear, less than the amount, even though you took it out in a vessel. So you have less than the amount, but you have it in a box, you have it in a bag, and that bag, it makes it bigger. Pater, you're not liable. The vessel that is carrying it becomes subject to that, and it becomes insignificant. He's not thinking about taking out the cup That's not what he's having in mind. He only has in mind to take out what's inside, and he doesn't have the right amount over there. Therefore, if he took out a living person, that's not tied to a bed, Potter, he's not liable. Even though he took out Af al hamita is potter also on the bed. Because the bed is secondary to the person, and anything similar to that. If someone takes out a box and inside the box there's a bunch of different types of spices, there's a bunch of different spices. Even if he's holding in his hand, you only become liable for one. You might say there's enough over there for many different carryings. There's different spices for each one. No, you're only liable once. Because it's only one time that you left, that you went out. With this, we finished the first chapter of today's Rambam. We're going to go straight into the second chapter of today's Rambam. Wow, a lot of notes in this. Chapter 19. Halacha Aleph. Sorry for those who weren't here in the beginning of the class. My father is not here today. I'm going to do all three chapters. So the second chapter, which is chapter 19 in the laws of Shabbos. And here we're going to be talking about clothing and different things that we carry while while we, it's the Rambam is on the screen, right? I think so. I don't know. I just got a message that
Yes, okay, I got it.
Yeah, no, they got a message that they're seeing my application. I don't know what that meant. Okay, so now we're going to talk about clothing. The previous chapter we talked about carrying different things outside, food and stuff like that, the amounts that you that you need to carry. Here we're going to say obviously when I wear my shirt, I'm carrying my shirt on me, but at what point is it considered to be clothing? At one point, and it's not considered carrying. And what are you allowed to carry in that kind of way, and what are you not allowed to carry? Halacha Aleph number 1. Kol klei hamilchama in yetzim ben b'Shabbos. Any type of weaponry you're not allowed to carry on Shabbos. But if you did, so ideally you're not allowed to. But if you did, imayu kelim if it's weaponry, but you're wearing it like it's a form of wearing. So if it is like a helmet or iron boots, etc., so then you're not liable because it's like clothing. But if it's other things that are not the way you're wearing them, like a spear, a sword, a bow, a round shield, a triangle shield, etc., so then chayav, you are liable. Halacha beis number 2. You don't wear on Shabbos a sandal that has a studded sandal, a sandal that has nails on it. Even on Yom Tov, even on holidays, we shouldn't wear it. But you're allowed to wear a belt that has pieces of metal on it, or silver or gold, like kings do. Because it is a form of jewelry. You're allowed to wear jewelry on Shabbos. It's like wearing clothing. You're allowed to wear jewelry on Shabbos. But you have to make sure that it's not hanging loosely, that it might fall off, because if it will fall off, then you're going to pick it up and carry it on Shabbos, and that is not allowed. A ring that it has a seal, and it's a piece of jewelry for a man, but not for a woman. If it's a ring that does not have a seal on it, so then it's a woman's jewelry and not a man's jewelry. Therefore, a woman that goes out with a ring that has a seal on it, like it's meant, it's a ring, but it's meant to stamp as a seal. So the isha man that goes with a ring that doesn't have a seal on it, they are liable because they're not wearing jewelry that's appropriate for them. Why they are liable? Because a man should only wear jewelry that's for him, and a woman should wear jewelry that's appropriate for her. Sometimes a man will give a spouse will give to his other spouse his ring to put away in the house, but then he'll carry it and won't wear it and carry it, and that will be a problem. Meaning a woman, her rings she'll always wear. But if she's carrying someone else's rings, she might put it in her pocket instead of wearing it, and that's where the problem is. So the same thing, a man taking his wife's rings to get it fixed, he might wear it on his finger in order to bring it there, but if he forgets or whatever, it'll be in his pocket, and that will be a problem, and therefore a man shouldn't wear a woman's rings on Shabbos, and a woman shouldn't wear a man's rings on Shabbos. Dalit number 4. That a woman shouldn't even wear it on Shabbos inside because she might take it outside to show it to others. But if she by mistake went out with it, so she is not liable. But a man, it's not a big deal if he has a ring, a stamping ring, because he's not going to show it off. It's a normal thing for him to have, at least in those days. But the general accepted practice in times of Rambam was not to go out with rings at all. Halacha number 5. A woman that goes out with a pin with an eye is liable, and a man is not liable. If a man goes out with a pin that doesn't have the hole on top, that's not without an eye, so chayev is liable. So a woman is not liable because it's considered to be it's jewelry for her. This is the general rule. If you go out with jewelry that's not considered to be your jewelry, it's not the way you usually dress. And if you do go out, so then you are liable. If you do go out with anything that's considered to be jewelry for you, and if it was loose and it could fall, and he'll bring it, and he might pick it up and carry it, he or she might pick it up and carry it in the public domain, then it is a problem. If a woman goes out with jewelry, that the custom is to take it off and to show it, not liable. If it's jewelry and it does not fall, and it's not it's not something that you show off to your friends, say, here, look at this, right? So then you're allowed to go outside with it. Therefore, bracelets that you put around your arm, or around your foot, around the leg, you're allowed to go out on Shabbos, and if it should be something that clings tightly, that won't slip off of your arm on its own, and anything similar to that. Halacha Vav number 6. A woman should not go out with woolen strands or linen strands or straps attached to her head, because she might take it out. Maybe when she goes to the mikveh, she'll take it off and then she'll carry them. And also this frontlet, some sort of thing in her hair, that goes across her head, maybe on her forehead, and not bangles of gold that go down, that go down from the sides onto her cheeks. if they're not connected one to another. And you're not with a gold crown. She shouldn't go out with a gold crown on her head. And also not with ankle chains that girls wear on their feet. So that they shouldn't take a big step and lose their virginity. These are all not allowed on Shabbos because they might fall, and if they fall, they will carry them maybe in a public domain, and that is a problem. Number 7, Zayin. A woman shouldn't go out with a necklace, a nose ring, or a flask of perfume attached to her forearm, and a small round pouch, which with oil, in a because a cotton egel shemanichem by Hashem and vanikra keveles, which is called keveles. V'lei bepeah shel seyar, and not with a wig shemanach sal reisha kadesh tera bala seyar, in order to make it look like she has a lot more hair. Like the kavel shel temer, and not with a woolen pad that goes on her face, that goes in front of her face, and not with a tooth that's in her mouth, a removable tooth, a removable tooth that's in a place where another tooth fell out, and not with golden teeth, that's on a black tooth, or black, or it's covering a red that's in her mouth, but a silver one is fine because it's not noticeable. Because maybe they'll fall out and she'll carry them, or she will show it to others in a public domain and then carry it in a public domain. Halacha ches number 8. So anything that you're not allowed to take into public domains, the sages decreed they can't take it out even into a courtyard. Chutz mikavel upeya shel seyar shemuter lotzis behen, except for a shaitel. 1 second over here. Because those you're allowed to go. She'enim refes k'dei sheloi tisgana al baila, so that she shouldn't appear unattractive to her husband. A woman goes out with an empty flask with no perfume is liable. She shouldn't take that out also. Halacha test number 9. A woman could go out with strands of hair that are attached to her head. Because it's not something that because water can go through it, and she doesn't take it off when she goes into the mikveh. And we're not worried that it's going to come off going to the mikveh, and that she'll carry it in a public domain. It doesn't matter if they were her own hair or someone else's hair. And an elderly woman should not go out with a young woman's, with a young girl's hair. Because that might be something that she'll take off and show to others, because it's nicer than her own hair. But a younger girl can go out with the older hair, because she won't show it. She won't take it off to show it. And anything that is weaved, that it's woven here, so then you're allowed to wear. And I think that would be considered a modern shaitel. Halacha test number halacha yud number 10. A woman could go out with strands, with strings or strands around her neck, because she does not tie them tightly. She doesn't get choked with it. If they were colored and then allowed, because maybe she take it off to show to her friends. And a woman can go out with gold on her head, because only honorable woman goes out like that, and she won't take it out and show it. And whether it's the thing that goes on her forehead or
or on her cheeks, shalzav of gold, bisman shein tfurin, bisvacha shal reisha. If it's connected to something, they're sewn onto something, they shall yiplu, and therefore they won't fall. So then it's okay. V'chein kol kietz b'dem, and anything similar to that. Halacha Yud Aleph number 11. Yaitza isha b'moch sheba'azna v'hu she'iyah kasher ba'azna. A woman could go out with stuff that's in her ear, something blocking her ear, as long as it is attached to her ear. And what is something that's connected to her sandal, that's fine. Or something that is there to catch a menstrual discharge. Also, because if that falls, nobody will pick it up to carry it in a public domain. Halacha Yud Beis number 12. And you could go, and she could go out with pepper, with grain, with salt, and any other substance that is placed in the mouth for bad breath. But that's if she did it. But a person shouldn't do it lechatchila in the first place on Shabbos. And other types of perfumes that a person will wear around their ear, around their neck, etc. Part of a peperes, batchila, b'Shabbos, ala even, ala eges, v'yaitza. Beloi tarim, v'tifraif, ala eges, k'dei leitzil livna katan. A woman may fasten her cloak in this manner using, provided that she does not use it as a ruse in order to bring in her young son, like that it's like a candy that she's carrying it. If she's carrying it for perfume is one thing, but if she's going to use it later to get her son to walk, like as a candy, then it was nuts. And also, similarly, she should not fasten her cloak in this manner using a coin, for it's forbidden to carry it. If her cloak was fastened in that kind of way, she could go out wearing it with this coin. Halacha Gimel number 13. Yaitse Adam Bekesam Shebeshinov. If someone has a wood chip for his teeth, right? He's using that chip to clean his teeth. So you're allowed to go out carrying it in your, what's it called? A toothpick, right? So if you have a toothpick in your house, you could go out with it with into a public domain. We don't do it today, but if it falls out of your mouth, don't go and pick it up. And if you have a band-aid on top of a wound or a bigger wound, etc. But it shouldn't be anything extra like a string or whatever that you might take off and use it for something else because it's valuable to you. And the peels of garlic, peels of onion that you put onto a wound, you're allowed to leave it on top of the wound when you go outside on Shabbos. A compress, a plaster, or a dressing of a wound, so that is fine. Anything, this is a category that anything that you're using, all these different things that he mentions over here, a locust egg, a fox's tooth, a nail from the gallows, etc., that they used back in the day for medicinal purposes. So anything that a person uses for curing purposes is fine to carry on Shabbos, as long as a doctor, not that you decide on your own, as long as a doctor says that it will help you medically. Halacha 14, halacha Yudalit. Yaitzis Isha be'even tekuma. A woman could go out with a tekuma stone of a mishkal even tekuma sheniskaven l'shkala l'rfua, and also the weight of a tekuma stone, which is a weight that was used for medicinal purposes, as a remedy. not only a pregnant woman, other women also, lest they become pregnant and miscarry. And you can go out with an amulet, with a kameya, but only one that has proven its efficacy, meaning that it comes from a proper source, not something that someone made, but it comes from a holy person, etc. What's so if it's something that helped 3 people already become cured, so then it proved itself, and therefore you can wear it on Shabbos. So Adam Adam, or if a person has already a history that he helped with his amulets to cure 3 people, so even a new one, so you could wear it on Shabbos. But if you carry an amulet, even if it's not from a proper source, you are not liable. You're not allowed to, but you're not liable. Because you're wearing it, tefillin, potter, and if you go out wearing tefillin, also you are not liable, even though we don't wear tefillin on Shabbos. If someone has a wound on his foot, if he goes out with a sandal, he wears a sandal. This is a time when they didn't necessarily wear shoes, so you wear a sandal on one foot. Sorry, no, they do wear sandals, but the wounded foot, he can't wear a sandal, so he wears a sandal on his healthy foot. But if he doesn't, if both feet are okay, you're not allowed to go out with one shoe on Shabbos. It's because either wear 2 shoes or one, or no shoes, not just one shoe. It's a katan minal gadol, and a child shouldn't go with an oversized shoe. But he could go on it with an oversized cloak, with an oversized shirt or something like that. A woman shouldn't go out with a loose shoe or a new shoe that she didn't wear for at least an hour before Shabbos. And if someone's missing a foot, they could go out with one. Anaktamin shel eitz ein yotzin b'hem b'Shabbos. You don't go out with wooden shoes. It's not a regular way to wear them, to wear wooden shoes. But if you do go out with wooden shoes, you are not liable. Halacha 16 tazayin. A person could go out with tufts of flax or a woolen wig worn by men with sores on their heads, right? So that you're allowed to go out on Shabbos. So this is when you soften them, that you put oil, or you were already wearing it for at least an hour before Shabbos. But if you didn't use it before Shabbos, or you didn't soften them, you're not allowed to wear them on Shabbos. Yud Zayin, number 17. So you can go out with coarse sackcloth, or tent cloth, or woolen blanket, or anything else that you're going to wear. Cover yourself from the rain, but not with a chest or with a container. And it's like not with a box or not with a mat to block the rain. A pillow or a blanket. If they were soft, if you have gadim like clothing, you're allowed to wear them around your head. If you're wearing it in a form of clothing, like wrapping around you. But if they were thicker and harder, then they are a burden, and you're not allowed to carry them on Shabbos. Number 18. You can go out with bells that are woven into clothing. And a servant could go out with a clay seal, which basically says who he is, but not a metal one, because maybe it will fall and he will carry it. If someone wraps himself in a talis and he folds it from one side and from the other side, or he folds it on his shoulder, if he was folding it there that way, that to gather the corners so it shouldn't rip, or shouldn't get dirty, so also he's not allowed to. But if he did it for niceness, that it should look like should look nice, that's the way they wear their talis, then he is allowed to. Test 19. If you go out with a folded talis and it's on his shoulder, is chayiv. He's liable. So you're not allowed to go with a folded talus on your shoulder. But he's allowed to go out with something wrapped on his like wrapped around his shoulder. Even though it's not tied, but if it's wrapped around the shoulder, not just folded on top of the shoulder, then it's fine. Anything that you're wrapping, but you didn't cover most of your head, most of your head and most of your body, so then your head and most of your body, so then you're not allowed to go out with it. So if it wasn't so big, so then you just tie it. So then it's like if you're tying it around you, so then it's like a belt, and you're allowed to go out with it. Halacha chaf number 20. אף על פי שהן חוטין ערוכין, ואף על פי שאין נוי הטלס, מפני שהן בטלן לגבי הטלס, ואין מקפיד עליהן בין שהיו ובין שלא היו. A talus that has unwoven strands at the end. You ever see a talus at the end? There's sometimes strands that come out of it, and that's the end of it, and they're not woven. You're allowed to go on it because you don't care about it. It's not something you care about. If you go out with a talus that's not yet woven properly, according to halacha, chayiv, you're liable. Because those strings are important to him, and he's careful about them because he's going to be careful before he puts it on. He's going to wrap the tzitzis, make the tzitzis properly around it. But a talus that has halachically kosher tzitzis on it, so you're allowed to go out with it on Shabbos by night or by day. That tzitzis are not carrying, they're to beautify the beged, the clothing. So and if these strings of tzitzis that were tied properly, masoi, they were heavy, chayev, then he is liable. Because this mitzvah say that it doesn't push off the Shabbos. This in this category. Halacha chaf aleph number 21. Lo yetze achayot. A tailor should not go out b'Shabbos b'machat hatchuva b'lei b'bigdai. A tailor should not go out if he has a needle stuck in his clothing. And a carpenter not with his level, like in his ear, that he carries to like gardi beira shebaznai. And a weaver shouldn't go with wool in his ear. And carders of flax with a string around his neck, or a money changer with a dinar in his ear with change that he carries on him, nor a dyer with a sample in his ear. So these are their work. This is what they do. So they shouldn't be carrying that on Shabbos, even if it's a tiny little amount. But if they by mistake did, they are not liable. Even though it's like they went out their work way, and on Shabbos we don't work. But since it was in their ear and it's not the regular way to carry it, so then they're not liable. Halacha chaf beis 22. Hazav sheyatza bekis shaloi chayiv mipnei she'ein kis zeh layitzia ela kederech hazayis a zav, which is a certain impurity. That goes out with a receptacle in order it's an emission that comes out of a man. So if he goes out with that thing to catch it, so he's liable, even though he needs it for his body. He's doing it in order that his clothing shouldn't get dirty. But it's not about his body, it's about his clothing, so therefore he's not allowed to have it on Shabbos. 23. Halacha chaf gimel. If someone has tefillin and he's in a public domain on Shabbos, what should he do? And Shabbos, we know we don't put on tefillin, so what should he do? So he says, he should wear them the regular way. And he puts the hand tefillin on his hand and the head tefillin on his head, and he goes home and he takes it off at home. If there were multiple pairs of tefillin outside, he takes them one by wearing them. But if there were a bunch out there and he doesn't have enough time during the day to go put them on, take them off, put them on, take them off, So then wait until Shabbos goes out and take them in after Shabbos once it gets dark. What if it was a time that there is a curfew? Or it was a bad time, it was dangerous to stand outside and watch a bunch of pairs of tefillin until the evening. So he covers them and he takes them. Halacha Chavdalid 24. But what if that was if he was afraid of the locals, the danger of the locals? But what if he was afraid that they would get stolen? Then he just carry all them. He take a few steps, less than 4 amas, less than 4 handbreadths at a time, or you pass it from one person to the other person within that 4 cubits until you get to your yard. That only if they had the straps of the tefillin on them, because then you know for sure that it's tefillin. But if they weren't connected, so then you don't need it, and then you don't do that. Chafei number 25. If you find the Sefer Torah outside, you just wait until it gets dark and then you take it. But if it's a danger to do that, so then you do take it. But and what if it starts raining? So you wrap it in leather and you cover it with something else, and like with your own clothing, and you carry it inside. Halacha Chavav, final halacha of this chapter. A tailor with his needle, lavlar b'kol musay, and a scribe with his pen. When it comes to Erev Shabbos, if it's before Shabbos, right before it gets dark, he shouldn't carry it, because maybe he'll forget, because he's so used to carrying it, he's going to forget and carry it on Shabbos. And a person has to always check his clothing, Erev Shabbos Friday before he goes to shul, Friday afternoon, see if there's anything that he forgot in his pockets. You're allowed to wear tefillin outside as it's starting to get dark on Friday afternoon. One of the halachas of tefillin is that you always have to remember that you're wearing tefillin. You always have to think about the tefillin. So you're allowed to go out with tefillin because you're always going to remember, I'm wearing tefillin and I have to get them off before Shabbos. If you went out in the public domain on Shabbos and you realize that you have tefillin on it, so you cover it with your hand. You cover your head, tefillin with your hand. That way, until you get to your house or to the house of study where you could take it off. And we finish chapter number 2 for today, and we move along to the 3rd chapter of today. It's a smaller, slightly smaller, chapter 20 of Hilchos Shabbos. The 3rd chapter for today, and here we're going to be talking about what an animal is allowed to do for you on Shabbos, and what an animal is not allowed to do for you on Shabbos. Halacha Aleph, halacha number 1. You're not allowed to take. Let's say you wanted something to go, so you put it onto the back of an animal in order for them to carry it for you on Shabbos. You're not allowed to do that because it says in the pasuk, because in the pasuk it says that even your animals have to rest on Shabbos, not just you. All your animals, not just a specific animal, all the animals. If you took it out with an animal, but you don't get malchus, you don't get punished for it, because it comes from a positive commandment. It's not a negative commandment. So therefore, a person who directs his animal while it has something on it already, he is pater, he is not liable. Number 2, but isn't it a clear verse in the Torah that your animal is not allowed to do it? So it's talking about plowing and anything similar to plowing. And it's talking about a prohibition that's punishable by death. and here and you don't get lashes for it, as opposed to this carrying this one would be lashes. Halacha number 3, Gimel. So you have your own animal, so you're not allowed to hire out your animal to a non-Jew that shouldn't do that your animal shouldn't do work on Shabbos, because you are obligated to that your animals should rest on Shabbos. And if you did do it, you get punished. Even a broken animal, you don't. You're allowed to do it through a broker because he won't lend or hire. Number 4, halacha daled. Mutar limker lem sus sheina sus aimed eler rechivas adam v'leila masoi v'achaynes esatzmai. A horse you're allowed to, because a horse is not meant for carrying; it's meant to carry people. And as we mentioned, a person, if you carry a person, it's okay because a person carries himself. And just like you're not allowed to sell it to a non-Jew. You're not allowed to sell it to a Jew that you think might turn around and sell it to a non-Jew. You're allowed to sell an animal that they're going to slaughter if they slaughter it in front of you. But stam without that you shouldn't, because maybe they'll work your animal on Shabbos and you are obligated that your animals shouldn't work on Shabbos either. Halacha hey number 5. Place where they would sell small animals, so that because small animals are not going to work, so then you're allowed to sell. There's places that had the custom not to, so then you don't sell. But a big working animal only through a broker. Halacha vav number 6. If someone's traveling and it gets to Shabbos and there's nobody, like you can't give it to a non-Jew to carry for him for Shabbos, but he had an animal with him. So you put it onto the animal as it's going, but and take it off when it stops. It shouldn't pause and stop while it's on it. So therefore, there's not a lifting and putting it down. You're not allowed to force it to go in a specific way as long as it's carrying something for you, because then you're making it work for you on Shabbos. And it's a decree of our sages that you don't put it on an animal unless that is your only option. Halacha Zayin number 7. What if you were with a deaf, mute, or incompetent individual or a child? You do not give it to them. You don't give it to them. You better to put it onto a donkey, onto an animal. If he was with a deaf, mute, or a mentally incompetent individual, you give it, but no animals, so you should give it to the mentally incompetent individual. If it's chedesh v'katan, if it's a deaf mute and if someone under bar bas mitzvah, nice lazy man shiyirtze, gives to either one of them. Didn't have an animal, not a guy, not a non-Jew. So then, and you're carrying something on Shabbos, and you didn't have a chance to put it away. So then you do take short steps, less than 4 cubits each time. What if you find something valuable on the street? So also use the same process. You go less than 4 cubits at a time. But better if he could wait until it gets dark. Should wait till it gets dark after Shabbos. If not, you should take it less than 4 cubits at a time. Halacha ches number 8. Mutar limshech esa behema b'mesek v'resen shala. A person is permitted to lead an animal in public domain with its own reins and its bridle, as long as the brittle and reins are appropriate for it, meaning that it was for it. A horse with a neck ring, a camel with a rope tied to its mouth, and a female camel with an iron bit, and a dog with a muzzle, meaning that's the proper way in times of Rambam and how they did for these animals. אבל אם הייתי בהמה במסג, והם משתמרת לגבי כגון שכאשר חבל לפי הסוס, או במסג שאינו צריך עלי, אלא משתמרת בפחז ממנו. Meaning, if you did overkill, you'd put it too much for a sus, for a horse. Or if you used what you used for a horse, for a donkey, so then it's too much. Then it's like a weight that you're just putting on an animal. Not allowed to do on Shabbos. Because anything that's excessive or too little, so then it is considered to be a burden, and you're not allowed to do that on Shabbos. Halacha test number 9. If there's camels, they used to be, they tie them that way. They go in a straight line. You're not allowed to do that on Shabbos, and you're not allowed to pull them even if they were tied together from before Shabbos. You're not allowed to direct them in that way. But a person is allowed to gather those ropes into his hand, but not that it should be too long. It shouldn't be more than a handbreadth outside of his hand. And if you're carrying that string, it has to be high. It can't be dragging on the ground. It has to be at least a handbreadth off of the ground. A leash has to be at least a handbreadth off of the ground. Why shouldn't you schlep the camels that are connected one to another? Because it looks like you're taking it to the marketplace. It looks like you're going to sell them, or that they're going to use them for something there. And therefore, for a similar reason, a person shouldn't take an animal wearing a bell around its neck, or a clapper or plug, because it produces a sound, and it will look like you're going to either sell it or do something with it in the marketplace. Halacha Yud number 10. An animal should not go out with a bell or coverings or seal around its neck, or a seal or coverings or strap on its foot, or a ladder on its neck. Made of Shabbos, made of Shabbos. A donkey shouldn't go out with a saddlecloth unless it is tied from before Shabbos, from Friday. A camel should not go out with a patch attached to its hump or its tail unless it was on its hump, unless it's tied to both the hump and to the tail. And a camel should not go out with its foreleg tied, its hand leg tied to its foreleg, and the same applies to any other animal. Halacha Yud Aleph number 11. Chickens shouldn't go out with cords or strings connected to their feet. And rams shouldn't go out with a small wagon that's connected to their fat, meaning it's like helping them walk. It had little wheels, so that way the weight helps them walk. And ewes may not go out with wood that are placed on the nostrils so that they sneeze and dislodges the worms that are inside their head, inside their nose. And a calf shouldn't go out with a yoke that's used for plowing. And an animal shouldn't go with a muzzle that's placed on its mouth, so that you put in it that it shouldn't bite or it shouldn't eat. And a cow shouldn't go out with this hedgehog skin on it, that keep it from animals going on it, in order to feed. And also it shouldn't go Yeah, it shouldn't go out with a strap between its horns, regardless of whether it's placed there as an ornament or as a restraint. A goat, that the horns are pierced, so it could go out with a rope that's tied onto its horns. On Shabbos, but if the rope is tied to a beard, it's not allowed, because then it might tear off and carry in his hands in the public domain, and the same applies to any similar situation. Halacha Yud Beis, number 12. Rams, it can go out with a wide strap tied to their genitals, so they shouldn't copulate with the females. And the leather that was strapped to their hearts, so that they shouldn't be attacked by wolves. Like as a safety precaution, and with this embroidered cloth that made them beautiful, attractive. And it was like that their tails are tied back, so that way the males don't attack them. Or under, in order that the males shouldn't attack them. And they can go out covered with a cloth, so that their wool should remain clean. Goats, they can go out with their teeth tied, so that their milk will dry up. But if you did it in order that the milk shouldn't come out until you're ready to milk it after Shabbos, then you're not allowed. Halacha Yud Gimel, number 13. A donkey should not go out wearing a saddle, even if it was connected to the donkey from before Shabbos. It says, and a horse should not go out wearing a foxtail or with scarlet thread between its eyes. An animal should not go out with a feeding bag in its mouth, or the metal shoes on its feet, or not a proven omelet on around its neck. But an animal is allowed to go out with a bandage on a wound, and with plates around the broken bone, like a cast type of plate around the broken bone. And with a placenta that is hanging from it. You're allowed to put a bell hanging around its neck in order for it to go around in the field, in your own field. And you're allowed to put a saddlecloth on a donkey while it's in your own yard. But you do not attach a feeding bag to an animal on Shabbos, even if it's in your own property. Halacha Yudalid, number 14, the final halacha for today. Keshem. Just like you're obligated that your animal shouldn't work for you on Shabbos, so too your servant, two different types of servants, also are not allowed to work for you on Shabbos. Even if they're doing it on their own behalf, meaning that they decided that they want to do it today. They're doing it your job, but they want to do it today instead of doing it on Shabbos, instead of doing it on Sunday. We have to hold them back from doing any types of creative work on Shabbos. It says in the pasuk, it says in the verse, because it talks about in the verse that your servant also is not allowed to. Eved, it's talking about slaves or servants that had a bris, that they went into the mikveh and they accepted upon themselves the mitzvahs that a servant is obligating them. But if they didn't go to they didn't have a bris, They weren't circumcised. They didn't go to the mikveh. Elo kibla alei and seven mitzvahs, but they only accepted upon themselves the 7 Noachide laws. They are considered to be like a ger teishav. Ger teishav is a certain type of person, a non-Jew that lived in the land of Israel in the time that there was a Jewish king. And they're allowed to do work for themselves on Shabbos for themselves, even in front of other people. You only accepted the ger teishav when there is the Jubilee year. And since a ger teishav, this type of person, this non-Jew that lives in the land of Israel, a permanent resident of the land of Israel, non-Jewish permanent resident of the land of Israel, he could do work, creative work for himself on Shabbos. And a ger tzedek, a convert, is like a Jew for everything. All the mitzvahs and then all the commandments, a convert is just like every single Jew. So when it says when it talks about the ger in the verse, it's not talking about a convert, it's talking about a ger teishav shehu likita yuschira shel Yisrael kamei ben Amasai, which is someone that lives in the land of Israel. Shelayasim lachal Yisrael. He also shouldn't do creative work for a Jew, Rabbi b'Shabbos, if like his master on Shabbos. Aval atzmai oisa, but if he wants to do something for himself, let's say he wants to cook for himself a meal, no problem, he could do it for himself, but not for a Jew on Shabbos. Even if he was his slave, his servant, he can only do it for himself. And with that, we finish chapter 20. If there's any questions, feel free to unmute yourself. I always